Hey friends, thank you so much for coming and for a chance for me to interview some more of my friends. Again, these interviews are not meant to be something that is like trying to highlight people's sorrow or pain so much as it's just an open-ended conversation to try to help people understand that they're not alone, and that there is hope in all of our circumstances, whether they be good or bad. The reason why I write music is to comfort the afflicted and confront the comfortable. And there are a lot of conversations that need to be had that are uncomfortable, in order that we might be able to actually bring comfort to people who are going through trials and tribulations. And I'm super, super excited to be able to introduce two of my favorite people, Zach and Kayla. Zach and I go way, 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 way back to camp ministry, and actually did some ministry in Mexico, running a camp down there while he was a teacher. And we've just been best buds for a super long time. And Kayla, I have not had the opportunity to know as much, but she stole Zach's heart in a very, very short amount of time. And so, therefore, is an awesome individual. So, I am super excited to introduce you guys to my friends, Zach and Kayla.
Hey guys.
Hi guys.
So, just starting off, how did you guys? I think people need to hear, like, how did you guys actually meet? Because I think this is a super awesome story, and it has to go into like you guys and your relationship in general. But how did you guys actually meet?
So our story goes all the way back to 2013,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't know if you Matt, I know you've heard of John Acuff, the author, but he
Yeah.
wrote a book back then and was trying to find some people to basically help him with an experiment, and he sent out an email to people who had subscribed to his mailing list and asked us asked for volunteers. Said, "Hey, if you're willing to help me with this experiment, sign up at this link."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like 3 days away from losing my job, and the company I was working for was closing. I didn't have anything lined up, and so I thought, well, whatever this is, I'm sure that I can do it because I got nothing but free time on my hands. And so I applied for it, and it ended up being a Facebook group that had over 2,000 people in it. And there were some other offshoot groups. One was for men, one for women, and one ended up being for single people. And it was just kind of a group for single people to encourage others. And, hey, we're all walking through the same path in life. And about 6 months later, this girl from South Dakota joined. And so for 4 years or so, we were just friends in the group, just, responding to others' comments and posts and, encourage one another that way, until 2017, when I had to drive to New York for a funeral. I was living in Ohio. And I said, "Hey, is anybody available to talk for a couple hours? I'm going to be driving and want to stay awake because it's not good to fall asleep when you're driving." And she's like, "Hey, yeah, you can call me. That's fine." And so what I thought maybe would be a 15, 20-minute, half hour at the most call ended up being 2.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And
We had a lot to say.
yeah. And to make a very long story, hopefully somewhat shorter, we started texting back and forth quite a bit and getting to know each other that way. And, in January, she kind of was like, "Hey, where is this going to go? Is this going someplace good or not?" And so we decided, "Hey, we'll see if we can make it work." And
Mm-hmm.
she was living in South Dakota. I was living in Ohio. And we tried to figure out a chance to actually meet face to face. And so I flew out there in May of 2018, had a good 5-day visit. She flew out to Ohio in June, where I proposed. We got engaged, and I moved out to South Dakota in August, and we got married in October 2018.
Yeah. Well done.
Typically we had a wedding date before he left South Dakota in May, so even before I had the ring, but
Something,
no.
but it was still a surprise-ish, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was.
That's awesome. And I'm super stoked that I actually got to be the best man, which apparently, according to one of my other live streams, if people looked it up, and the best man was supposed to be the guy that went. That was you. Yeah, that's right. Kayla was the one that told me. Yeah.
I'm
The
a
best
history
man's.
nerd. What can I say?
Yeah. I was trying to rack my brain. I was like, who in the world posted that? Like, oh yeah, you did. So we all know that the best man's the guy that's supposed to ride along with the groom to go beat off the
Yeah.
the bride's family from trying to take her back.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and apparently it works
So,
because you guys are still together. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So you should have had a sword at the wedding. That's what I learned from that.
and unfortunately, you guys aren't going to get married more than once. So that's
It's
a missed
true.
opportunity.
It
But
You know
is.
what? We'll
It
forgive
is.
you this time.
I was
But
going to
if you
say
ever
next
get to be a
time,
best
but
man again, just remember, take along a sword.
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That is, yep. So I have a new song that's coming out. It's called "Your Kids Are Home." That was specifically written about my sister's two miscarriages,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, you guys have actually had some experience with miscarriages and losing some children of your own. Do you mind sharing a little bit about kind of when the first one was and kind of what that experience was like?
Yeah. So it was March 2019. I uh, took a test one night and got a positive and was extremely excited and told him the next day. And uh, just had I don't know, a wonderful couple of days just thinking about the fact that we were going to get to be parents, and it is something that we both greatly desire. And it just kind of seemed like God was making our dream come true. And that Monday, I was at work at school, and um, basically through a series of things, realized that I was miscarrying. And I had friends that had had miscarriages. I knew it happened to other people. It had just never crossed my mind that it's something that would happen to me. And
Hmm.
so, definitely at first, I was in shock. He met me at the ER, and um, I just remember laying there, um, waiting on the doctor. They were going to do an ultrasound and check and see, what was going on and everything. And I remember laying there and just staring at the ceiling and praying and just asking God, why is this happening? And at some point, I realized and I knew um, that our baby was gone. Like, I just knew. Um, and the one question I asked God was, when will I know? Sorry. How
You're
will I
okay.
know if it was a boy or girl? I want to
Hmm.
name our baby. And um, in that moment, God just spoke to my heart and confirmed in my heart that it was a girl. And while I was laying there, the only thing that kept like running through my brain um, was 2 Corinthians 12:9, the first part of that verse. And it was almost like God was just speaking that verse, that scripture to me. And all I could think was, his grace is sufficient for me. His grace is sufficient for me. And I cannot think of another moment in my life where I have been that weak, where I have felt that much in need of God's strength and his grace. And so our first baby we named Grace Ann. And that was so her heaven day was March 4th, 2019. Um, and then we went through um, several months of um, just learning, I guess, and consulting doctors and stuff. We moved from South Dakota to Ohio. So we switched doctors and there was lots of tests and things. We ended up going to a fertility specialist starting in 2020 because during those months of trying, we just realized that something was wrong, something wasn't right. And so thankfully we had a really great OB that referred us to a fertility specialist in Ohio. And we went to him, and within, I think it was about 3 months, um, It would have been, um, sorry, November
Mhm.
2020, the first part of November. Um, we found out we were pregnant a second time. And at that point, we felt like, the first pregnancy had been a surprise. We weren't expecting it. This one we had been trying for so long, and it felt like, yes, finally, like, yes, God is, um, letting this happen. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So the second time, the first time, it's sad, and it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, at least for me, it was like, well, 1 in 4 women experience this. 1 in 4 couples
Mhm.
have this, and so you're like, okay, it's sad, but you don't necessarily think like, well, maybe this is a
Yeah.
long term thing or at the end of the world,
Yeah.
you know. And then the second time through, you're like, okay, we're nervous, but at the same time, there's reason still for hope.
Mhm.
And you're like, okay, well, this, you essentially made it through the first few days, and everything was still seeming to be fine, and we're like, okay, well, maybe we're okay here.
Yeah.
And then we got, because we're a little bit older, we get to the 6 week mark, and we have our first ultrasound, which normally wouldn't happen until a couple weeks after that. And we go in there and we see the baby and we see the heartbeat, and you're thinking, all right, this is progressing, everything is going the way that it should, and our baby's heart is beating, and everything is going the way that it should. And then we go back for an 8 week ultrasound 2 weeks later, and there's no heartbeat. And you
Hmm.
just, all the hope that you had and everything that you'd been thinking just flies right out the window in that moment. And they wanted us to come back, a few days later, because we went on a Thursday or a Friday, and said we'll come back Monday or Tuesday, and we'll do a confirmation ultrasound. And we've never experienced this part of it before, because we hadn't made it this far. And so
Hmm.
they say that, and you're trying to figure out whether you should hold on to hope and keep thinking, oh, this, it could be that it's wrong, or just start to face the reality of it. And you go so far back and forth between those two things. And we went back that next week, and sure enough, there was still no heartbeat. And you know so we had to you know deal with it again the second time. And you have, after the first time, it's like, okay, this is this is bad, but it is what it is. And now after the second time, you're just, why is this happening again?
Mhm.
why
Yeah.
why am I having to face this again?
Yeah. And the first time all the doctors said, tried to say comforting things like that, like, oh, this happens, 1 in 4 women. And, they tried to say like, oh, you're healthy, or, all the right things. My doctor, did various tests, but not really, invasive tests or anything. And so as far as she could tell, she's like, oh, things look good. You're fine. This is just one of those things that happens. And so I think going into our second pregnancy, that was our mentality, was like, that was just like a fluke, horrible thing that happened. Um, and the fact that we were under such, strong care with our fertility doctor and my OBGYN, when we got pregnant the second time, I think there was that, I don't want to say misconstrued hope, but there was, um, I don't know, there was just an extra layer, I think, of hope and of, what's the word I'm trying to think of, but um,
Like answer.
yeah, like confidence, yeah, that, okay, we're taking all the right things, we're doing all the right things, like we're seeing the right doctors, like things are gonna work out this time. um and even at that first ultrasound, like everything looked great. There wasn't any cause for concern. And I still have the recording of that ultrasound on my phone. Sorry.
No, you're
Um,
fine.
and the hope that was in our voices and the joy. Um, and there's nothing like that feeling of joy. Hearing your baby's heartbeat. But then there's also nothing like the sorrow you feel when they say, "I'm so sorry." Um,
Mm.
there's no heartbeat. Um, and so our second baby, we named Gabriel. Um, we, along with um, just the shock and everything, and the grief, it took us 3 weeks. The miscarriage, I guess, process took us 3 weeks,
Mm.
almost, because from the time they first, that 8-week ultrasound where they, didn't detect the heartbeat, um, then the next ultrasound that they checked, I went through several rounds of medication, but my body didn't recognize that the baby was gone. Um, so my body just wanted to hold on. And so it was 3 days before Christmas, and I
Mm.
ended up having to have surgery. Um, and again, my OBGYN at the time was amazing, and she's the one that did the surgery. Um, she, after the surgery, um, let us, I don't know, for lack of a better word, hold him. Um,
Mm.
so uh, they were getting ready. They were going to send him in for genetic testing and stuff, and just to see what they could see, if there was anything. And but they let us, yeah, they let us hold him before we left. Um, and that in and of itself, with our first miscarriage, we didn't get an ultrasound. We There was very little closure,
Yeah.
um, with that. With the second one, what was hard was that time period of that in between, from when we found out that he was gone until I actually had the surgery. Because we were living in limbo. You know, there, yeah, it's like I was still pregnant, but I wasn't. You know, um, and then this last time, we have since moved to New York, and haven't we have basically decided we were going to kind of take a break from doctors and consulting fertility specialists and everything, because we went through 2.5 years of that, and it was extremely hard on us physically and emotionally,
And expensive.
and super expensive. And yeah, like ridiculous. Um, and so we were going to take a break from that, and we had, and this last November, um, I randomly took a test, which I'll just throw this in there. Once you've experienced a loss or you're going through fertility treatments,
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you're trying or not, or you say you're trying, or say you're taking a break. You take a pregnancy test every month. Like, I don't care. You might even take 5. Like,
Yeah.
I've probably spent the equivalent of a college education on pregnancy tests. I'm just going to be real. Like,
Yep.
let's throw that out there. Um, but anyways, I took a test, not thinking anything of it, and lo and behold, it was positive. Like big, bold, bright line. Like, have never, like, my other 2 tests that I'd taken before were like, I mean, it was there, but it was like, this was like
Yeah.
super dark line. Um, I did probably the worst possible thing in that I sent him an ambiguous text, and I said, "Hey, you need to come home right now." He thought somebody had died.
Oh no.
Um,
Yeah, it was real disconcerting for that 5-minute walk from my office to my house.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, so I told him, and we were very excited and everything. And um, uh,
But so we were excited, but with this experience, because after the first one, it was, you know, it's bad, but
Yeah.
there's a possibility that this is just a fluke thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now there's a whole new set of worry. There's a whole new set of cares, and so there's joy in that moment, but there's
Hmm.
also a lot of fear that just explodes right into your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're and I remember, you know, crying tears of joy, and then I'm not exactly sure when, but I remember very distinctly they shifted to tears of fear and just like, okay, God,
Yeah.
how are we going to deal with this? How do we live in faith and not fear? And how do we not just automatically expect the worst? And I dealt with a lot of that
Yeah.
for, well, probably still dealing with it on some level, but
Yeah.
that constant fear of this happened before. What if it happens again?
Hmm. I
Yeah.
think for me, it was the fear, that constant thought of like, I have to be doing something to make this work this time. Like that constant fear of like, anything I'm putting into my body is going to affect this pregnancy. Anything I do is going to affect this pregnancy. Like
Mhm.
I remember being so extremely concerned about even walking from the house to the car because it was icy. And like, if I fall, what's that
Mm.
going to do to our baby? And
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
that's a personality difference, I think, between her and I, because she's like, all right, I'm going to take control of this and I'm going to do everything possible to make this work. And I'm just sitting in the back, like, oh man, something terrible is going to happen. This would be the worst experience of my life,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's the same exact thing. Go to 6 week ultrasound, and not only do we have one heartbeat, we have two heartbeats. And we're shocked, but also overjoyed. Hey,
Mhm.
God's bringing two babies into our life.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
same thing, we go back for an 8 week ultrasound. They go back in, and there's no heartbeats.
Mm.
And
um the part of that I've had to, I guess, kind of choose to see the blessing and the pain, sorry,
No.
is
Fine.
that, you know, sorry, um, just the fact that we got to see them both that day. We got to see both of their heartbeats,
Mm.
and they measure perfectly, exactly 6 weeks, one day. Um, because when we went back at 8 weeks, baby B only measured 6 weeks, one day, which
Wow.
meant that that was the day that he stopped growing.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and had we had that ultrasound a day later,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have gotten to see him alive. Um,
Mm.
and it's a small consolation, but um, and then baby A was 7 weeks, 4 days, which was
Mm.
the same size that Gabriel was too. They were both that. And you know, um our hearts were obviously, like, we were devastated. Um I remember not being able to put my own shoes on when we were getting ready to leave the exam room. So Zach had
Mm.
to put them on for me. um so thankfully there are boots in there to slip on, but still it's good
It's the thought
servants
that
play there.
counts.
Yeah,
Yeah. He still tried.
he still tried. But and they had us talk to um, a midwife there at the clinic, um, and the doctor and stuff. And they asked us, do you want to go home and wait and let your body do things naturally? Do you want to do the medications? Do you want to do the surgery? And, you know, as hard of a decision as it was, we both remembered last time and that 2.5, almost 3 week time period. you know um I that is literally the darkest place, like time of my life, was that point. And I told him I was scared. What? I was scared of letting myself go back to that dark place. Um, I was scared for him too, you know, him, you know, the both of us having to walk through that again. And so, as hard of a decision as it was, um, we scheduled the surgery, and um, they were, because of that, they were able to do genetic testing on them. And we found out after the fact that they were for sure both boys, which the type of twin that they were um, is very rare.
Hmm.
And now I can't think of the term, but they shared an amniotic sac. And that in itself is extremely rare and cause for
Concern.
concern.
Yeah.
um, and then also, um, the other part of that is that um, they had one of their chromosomes didn't form properly. Um,
Yeah.
and so, because of that, the doctor said you never want to say a pregnancy is doomed to fail, but
Yeah.
this pregnancy was not meant to survive. As
Yeah.
hard as it is to say, um, because had they survived even the whole pregnancy, they would not have survived very long after birth.
Yeah.
Um,
It, yeah, it would have been highly unlikely that they ever would have in
yeah,
the first place.
yeah,
And there's joy in that because they didn't suffer.
yeah,
There's
Yeah.
joy in it because, every time the doctor's like, at this early stage, there's nothing that you could have done. There's nothing you could have
yeah,
done differently. And, the doctor this time said the same thing. And, you know, you always wonder, is that really true? Could I have done something differently? Could something different have happened? And with this, there's not. I mean, there's nothing that caused it. It's a thing that just happened. It's part of. I mean, somebody who didn't believe in God might say it was a fluke. It was just chance. And obviously, I believe that God ordains all things, and so for whatever reason, he allowed this to happen. But there's nothing at all that either of us could have done differently to change what happened.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So through all of that, what were some of the most helpful things that people who were able to come alongside you did? Like what actually brought you comfort through those times, and not just like, oh, that was nice, but like things that were genuinely like helpful.
You go
Yeah.
first, then I'll go.
So the second time with Gabriel, I remember it was the first or second night after we found out. My best friend and his wife from Ohio, who we're still very much in contact with and very close to. She came over that second night and sat with Kayla, talked with her, brought flowers, brought dinner, those kind of things that neither of us are up to because we're just trying to deal with the emotional fallout of everything.
Yeah.
And, she came over and cared for us and just sat with us in our grief. And that was meaningful. Her husband, the next time I saw him at church on Sunday, he is the most anti-physical touch person that I've ever met in my life. And
Yeah.
I can count on one hand the number of hugs in my life that he's given me.
It might be up to 2.
I think there's probably 3 or 4, but he definitely that next Sunday gave me a hug. And
Hmm.
just having somebody willing to reach outside their comfort zone and give me
Yep.
what they knew I needed
Yeah.
was by far the most helpful thing in that entire time, that month and a half that we were really dealing with it. That was by far the most helpful thing for me.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's funny because I think of like in each incident or in each instance there was something different. Just because of, I guess, the circumstances and stuff. With Grace, the day it happened and I was on the way to the ER, I actually called my friend Heather
Hmm.
and I said, I need you to meet me at the emergency room. Um, and Zach was with me, but I knew I needed somebody else there because um, I knew I know him, and him seeing me in pain is something that is extremely difficult for him. And
Yeah.
I knew that for both of our sakes, we were going to need somebody else there, a calmer head, And she has been through this situation. Like she has been through this multiple times, actually. Um,
Hmm.
and so um, I knew just from her testimony and her experience, um, and and stuff. So she came and she actually sat there with us. She sat with me in the room. I'm sorry if this is too graphic. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, let's just be real. There was like blood everywhere because that's what happens when you have a miscarriage. And she
Yeah.
sat there with me while they did an ultrasound so that he didn't have to, because that part of it I knew was going to be difficult. Um, so she sat there with me, held my hand. She was my voice, really, in some of those moments, our voice to the doctor. Um, and having her there meant the world to us, and it still does. And I don't think we would have survived that without her being there. God definitely. I'm so thankful that he brought me her as a friend and stuff. So, um, I would say since then, yeah, like Zach said, just in general, just being there. Um, I can think of another friend of ours that a year, it would have been Grace's like heaven birthday. So a year after that happened, another friend of ours sent me flowers. So it was the year
Hmm.
anniversary, and she remembered. I hadn't said anything. She remembered, and all of a sudden I get this rose plant in the mail from our friend Ashley. I felt really bad when I killed it like a year and a half, 2 years later. I love the plant died though, and I'm very sad. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever told Ashley that though. Yeah. Um, but just the fact that she remembered, and I've had other friends do similar things too. I had a parent of some of my students when from my school in South Dakota, that when we lost Gabriel, she had a whole box. It was like dinner in a box mailed to us.
Wow.
Um, and this is a person that I'm like, she didn't need to do that, but she knew that it was a way that she could take care of us and that she could show love to us. um and this time around, it's it's been
It's different
it's different.
because
Yeah.
we're in a brand new place. We've at that point only been in New York for about 6 months, and I mean, we have our friends that we work with and live with. We work at a Christian camp, and so there's us and there's three other families that are here full time, and you know we were still at that point trying to find a church. We're doing all these different things, and
Mhm.
we're at a couple points in there. I'm like, we had all these people to take care of us. Is anybody going to be here to take care of us this time? And I tell you, our camp
Mhm.
family, they stepped up big time. They
Yeah.
helped us out. The pastor of the church that we were most likely going to happens to be a friend of mine that I grew up with, and he and his wife uh, have been so helpful to us. Joel was at the hospital with me the day of Kayla's surgery. A couple
Hmm.
days later, his wife brought dinner, 35 minutes from their house to our house, just so we didn't have to worry about cooking.
Yeah.
Just people who have really gone out of their way to care for us,
Mhm.
and it's just been really neat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other thing to me, as far as like, what can you do for someone in a situation? It's easy to say, like, just be there. But like, what does that look like? It's going
Yeah.
to look different for every person. For us, um, it was like bringing a meal, sending a card, even a text, um, those are the things that mean a lot. But I think I think also, and this is going back to our friend Ashley, it's remembering with
Hmm.
us, you know, um, when someone actually remembers all four of our babies' names, you know,
Hmm.
or remembers that, oh, hey, this was the month that, that happened, and helps us, you know, encourage, encourages us and remembers with us. Um,
It's
yeah.
it's such an isolating thing because like you mentioned, our culture puts a taboo around it. It's not something we talk about. It's not
Yeah.
something that we are willing to really, share with others. And when people reach through that and they are willing to break down those barriers and sit
Mhm.
with us in that grief, whether it's literally physically sitting with us or, with gifts, with caring for us, with meals, all those different things. People that are willing to do that, to reach through that discomfort, to break down those walls and reach out,
Mhm.
those are the people that really impacted us the most.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what did it do to your relationship, as far as like your faith relationship to God, and then also your relationship to each other?
I think different times would be
Yeah.
different answers to that question.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
I think for the second time was the hardest.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I think the second time and I don't want to speak for Kayla here, but I think
No,
that
that's
was the
fine.
time for her
Yeah.
that her faith was really challenged the
Yeah.
most.
No,
Um,
he's right. Um, and I don't know if it was that, like I said, that amount of time we went in between there where we were kind of in that weird limbo situation. Um, but I don't know. Um, I think a piece of it was just I had um, I had just assumed, I think, that okay, I had I had my one miscarriage. I'm one and done. Like that's it. Now I'm just going to have babies and they're going to be healthy and we're not going to have any more problems. And so I think when we did miscarry, it was it was such a shock. Like you know, the first time it was sad and there was an amount of shock in that as well. Um but we had had such little time to even think about the fact that we were pregnant. It was just within a matter of days. Um, and I also think somewhere in my mind, I had equated the fact that, oh, we had an ultrasound, baby was healthy, there was a heartbeat. Now, definitely everything is okay. Um, and there was just something about that, you know, that disappointment, I guess, um, that there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of anger directed at God. And I don't really think it was the question, like the broad question of like, why did this bad thing happen to me? I don't think it was really ever that. Um, I think it was more so for me at least. Just I felt like God had turned his back on me, you know. Um, and so I think in that time I just really struggled with wanting to have anything to do with him because I felt like he didn't want anything to do with me.
and I think in that was the struggle for me, and that I could see her pain, and I could see her hurting, and I knew the answers that she needed to hear, but I didn't know how to break through that and tell her the things that she needed to hear in a way that wouldn't make her hate me.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
like, that was, I would say that's definitely the time that our relationship has been tested the most,
Yeah.
was in that, you know, 2-3 months after Gabriel. For me personally, the hardest time in my faith has been this last time. Um, Again, because I was so overwhelmed by that fear right away. I was like, oh man, what if everything happens, the same way it did last time? And
Yeah.
sure enough, we get the same 8-week ultrasound and we get the same information. And I was like, I knew it. I knew that this is what was going to happen. God, I knew that you were going to let us have this joy and then you were going to take it away. And there was a lot of, like she said, a lot of anger in my heart and a lot of, God, why would you promise, or why would you allow this good thing to come into our lives and then just rip it right away? And so there's been, and I won't say that I've fully worked through all of it yet because I'm pretty sure I haven't, but there's been a lot of opportunities for me to just look at God and say, God, what is going on here? And I guess this is, his providence. I started a new Bible reading plan at the beginning of the year. And, most Bible plans you read either start in the Old Testament and just read your way through, or you start Old Testament, New Testament. And this one's actually broken out by day. And so each day I read a different part of scripture. So like Sunday, I read, the books of the law. Monday, I read books of history. And so in that, one of the books that I started out reading at the beginning of the year has been Job. And just, watching Job, who suffered through arguably, much worse suffering than I have. And, to see him wrestle with that pain has been helpful for me to process my own feelings, because, Job didn't do anything to deserve his suffering. And if I trust God and I believe what he says in his word, then I haven't done anything to deserve this suffering, and
Yeah.
so there's frustration still in that I don't know why God allowed this to happen, but there's also trust in knowing that his ways are higher than mine and his thoughts are higher than my thoughts. And so for whatever reason that he's allowed this to happen, it's for his goodwill. And if he can use our story to help encourage or lift someone else up, then they don't know, maybe I won't feel like it's been worth it. But it'll feel like there is some good to it and some point to it.
Yeah.
Um, I know one thing that really helped me after that time period, especially, was in February. We went to a marriage conference.
Yeah.
So February 2021, we went to a marriage conference at Scioto Hills, and I had actually never been there before, so it was my first time there. And I will admit, I don't know, maybe if he knew this, but like I kind of didn't want to go. Like I wanted to go to see the camp, but I was not in a frame of mind where I really wanted to go somewhere to get closer to God. Like that was just not. Um, but he wanted to go, so we went, and it,
Just as an aside,
yeah,
the fact that two of them happened right around Christmas time adds a whole extra layer of
yeah,
difficulty
Yeah.
to this. So,
it's true.
sorry. Anyway,
Yep.
No, it's okay. And then, so anyways, we went to this conference, and it just so happened that the speakers that were supposed to be there, Aaron and Lori, weren't able to make it. And so Scott and Pam stepped up and,
the directors of the camp.
yeah, to be the speakers for the weekend. And during one of their times speaking, they shared a lot about their testimony together as a couple and everything. And part of that was their own story of loss. And Pam shared quite a bit of their story and stuff. And it was it was like someone was taking my thoughts in that moment
Hmm.
and seeing them to this whole group of people, because I was like, what, this person that works in full-time ministry, that is this wonderful Christian woman that obviously all these people look up to, she's had these same thoughts that I'm having right now. I think it helped me realize that, one, it was okay. Like it's okay to um it's okay to be angry. God can handle it. God can handle my anger. He can handle my questions. Um
Yep.
And I remember her specifically saying that. And then she talked about this book that I ended up actually going home and buying and reading. Um, that honestly I would recommend for anybody that's going through uh, a miscarriage, a child loss, anything. And it's called Safe in the Arms of God by John MacArthur. Um, and I don't even know when it was published. Like, it doesn't really matter, but it's an older book. But I um, read that book, and it was just full of truths that I needed to hear. And I think I didn't even realize how much I was holding on to um, the fact that these were not my children, these were God's children. These that I needed to just accept and realize that, you know, our our children don't have to ever feel pain. They will never feel pain. They will never feel fear or sadness, you know, um, that they were immediately born into the loving, gracious arms of God. And honestly, if anything, I should feel jealous. You know, I should I should be wishing that I got to experience that. Um, and so as much as I miss them and I wish that I could hold them myself, that simple fact is, I think, something that just keeps me going. Um, you know, so
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. And honestly, like I couldn't think of a better way, because one of the other questions that I was going to ask was, what would you tell somebody who is, going through it? And I think you know, nailed it.
yeah,
Honestly, like God can take your questions. He can take your anger. He's big enough to love you even through all the emotions that we feel at all the different times.
yeah,
Um, and you're right, they're God's children. I remember even when my kids were born and when Ivy wasn't doing too well and was born with a medical condition, of just realizing that, God, she's yours. And we would love to keep her, but ultimately, like, he's the one who's the author and perfecter of all life. And
yeah,
he chooses who stays and who goes. And it's not up to us to understand it. You had said before, Zach, God's ways are much higher than ours. And thank goodness for that. Because if he had my mind, this world would not be anywhere near as complex or as cool as it is.
Yeah,
It would be
for sure.
very, very simple.
yeah.
Um, so,
I think
but
I think the other thing I would say to someone else going through this is, don't be afraid to talk about it.
mm,
I
yeah,
think I think there's this fear that you don't want to make someone else uncomfortable. Like, you
yeah,
don't want to make someone else feel bad. You don't want to bother someone with your own feelings and stuff. Um, it's okay. It's okay to talk about. Um, I have never experienced childbirth, but I've experienced pregnancy, and just there for a while having friends not want to talk about pregnancy in front of me, which I understand. They thought they were being considerate. But I have experienced that, and I want to be able to share my experiences with people. It may have been a very short time period, but and so don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to talk about all the things you're feeling. Um, my poor husband obviously got to hear a lot of how I was feeling and see a lot of how I was feeling. Um, but it definitely is better to even have more than just your spouse to talk to, whether it's a friend or a counselor or a pastor or whoever.
Yeah.
Um, but
If I could say something to the guys out there who may experience this, because this is not a thing that she experienced, it's a thing that we experienced.
for sure.
And guys, you will want to take care of your wife, and you should take care of your wife because you're called to do that, and that's important. But you need someone to take care of you too, because You can't bear your own emotions and her emotions without help. And so, find another guy. And our culture is not about friendship. Our culture is not about, being emotionally vulnerable, especially as guys. But man, when I had people to reach out to and say, "Man, I'm struggling today. I'm hurting. I need prayer. I need help. I need support." It was invaluable to be able to have that. I remember the first time being able to go to lunch with my buddy Nathan, who had experienced the same thing too, and just having an opportunity to talk to him, and just for him to tell me what his thoughts were and how he relied on God.
Mhm.
That's important, and it's so necessary that we as men have that support system. And so, guys, if you are experiencing this, please find someone that
Yeah.
can walk alongside it with you, because you need that. You won't survive without it.
And I think to those that maybe haven't experienced it themselves, but know people that have, it's okay to ask questions. Matt, you started off by saying like that you didn't want us to say anything we weren't comfortable with or answering any questions we weren't comfortable with. Um, but I think, like I said, I don't my issue is I don't ever want to bother someone else with too much information, but that doesn't mean I don't want to share. So sometimes you just need to be willing as a friend to open up that door. um like I can think of my friend JR and how she asks me questions. She'll ask me very direct questions about various things, and she wants to know all the details because she knows that it's her way of showing that I matter to her, that she cares. And she's not trying to solve the problem. She's not necessarily going to be able to help other than just sitting and listening, but that in and of itself is invaluable. She's sharing her time and showing that she cares. And so I think just being that person to your friends that are going through loss, and being willing to say, "Hey, tell me anything you want to tell me. Like, tell me about your doctor's appointment. Tell me about, you know, the time you actually got to hear their heartbeat. Tell me about this, that, asking those questions." Um, and then I think the other thing too for me was um, a group of friends back in South Dakota one time when we were back visiting, um, had us had me over one evening, and I think there was about 6 ladies, and they just gathered over me and prayed over me for like, I don't know, it was like an hour and a half. That they just went around the circle and just prayed over me. Um, I'm so grateful for that. You know, um, so grateful that they were willing to spend their time praying for us and praying for um, um, just for the situation and stuff. And um, I still remember that, and I still remember some of the things they prayed. Um, and just being willing to pray and to lift up those people in your life that are going through that loss, sincerely. And yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to thank you guys so much for being willing to share your story and being so open about it. I really do hope that not only this interview, but anybody who gets an opportunity to interact with you, which I know they already do, get an opportunity to see how much your faith and your viewpoint of who God is and what He's done for you allows you to be able to walk through fear and walk through hard times and be real about it, and be honest. Because there's so many times where we just assume that Christians are supposed to be butterflies and rainbows and not even like floating above the ground because nothing bad ever happens to them. And I just want to say you guys have both been a huge testament and encouragement to my faith to be able to see you both faithfully continue to walk with the Lord through hard and trying times, and realize and understand that like God is still the same who He is, and it's okay to question, but
Yeah.
know that He is still faithful and good,
Mhm.
even when we're questioning what that goodness actually looks like.
Yeah.
Um, so, and I just I want to thank you guys so much. I know that this has been super helpful for me, and I know it's going to be super helpful for other people. And I'm super excited to be able to continue to do life with you guys, and realize that, you know, though you've already walked through many hard times, there's no guarantee of what tomorrow holds. But I definitely am encouraged that you are continuing to use um, your faith in your community, to be able to share that there's so much more than just what we feel in the moment. And I really feel like that's going to be a huge testimony to so many other people. That this story, your story, your testimony, is already changing people's lives just by sharing it, and they may be lives that you may never get a chance to interact with, which is why it's just so cool that that will continue to keep going.
Yeah. I think, since losing the twins, like it's only been 3 months. Not even 2 months. I can't do math. But something I've really been praying about and for is that God would truly show us ways that we can use our story, that we can redeem that pain into something for good. Um, and I think this is a part of that. I think just being able to talk to you and be honest with you. And I don't know what God will do in the future. There's thoughts running through my head, but who knows what will come of them. But I think it's just, I don't know. When you're going through that pain, it's almost like you don't want to see good. It's, you know, at least for me, like it was easy for me to sit in the grief, and to not see joy and to not let myself see God's goodness. Um, but I think that's the challenge. And I think just as a Christian going through any kind of grief or pain, that's the challenge that um, God calls us to, be thankful and to find joy in everything. And it seems so easy to say when you're not in the midst of it. Um, but like I said, we had to find those small blessings, in the midst of it. This was the first time that we actually got to tell our friends and our family before we um, lost them. So we got to have that moment this time for the first time, telling people, um, and stuff like that. It's not easy, but in the end, God definitely uses it. He uses that pain. He uses that grief, to grow you, um, and even to grow the relationships with people. There's friendships that I wouldn't have if it wasn't for the loss, that we've experienced. Um, and I say that genuinely. There's people I wouldn't have met if it wasn't, you know, for losing Grace or for losing Gabriel or the twins. Um, and so God has used those experiences to just bless us in different ways as well. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much. I know it's getting kind of late,
yeah.
but I do appreciate so much your willingness
Yeah.
to use your story to be able to encourage other people. And we'll definitely have to do this more often. Hopefully, next time we can do it, I'll just be like on the couch with you guys.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for sharing your story. For everybody else who's watching this, there are going to be some links for some resources like the book Kayla mentioned. I'll put a link to that in the description below. So if you want to read that resource, that would be fantastic. But thank you guys so much for being willing to be open and honest, and to be able to just spend time sharing your story and your life with me. I truly
Thanks
do
for giving us
appreciate
the
it.
opportunity.
Yeah.
It's really great.
We're glad to be here.
For sure. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you all later.